All right, everybody. We are going to be taking a step back a little bit. I had somebody ask me this on one of our webinars recently because of some of the reporting I was doing, building some of these custom transaction detail reports or custom transaction summary reports that we've seen on some of our recent videos. And someone said, can we take a step back and kind of talk about list usage and why we would use things in different areas and stuff like that. So we're going to go through that today. All right. I'm Marjorie. I'm the CEO of Fourlane. I love teaching these classes every week. We want to, of course, give you guys the tools to start thinking about how we can use QuickBooks more effectively. I was on a webinar just the other day, or a demo just the other day that we were doing for a client, and the client thought that they would have to go to Dynamics, or the prospect at that point, thought they'd have to go to Dynamics just to get some of the reporting done that they needed, when in actuality, it was pretty simple what they're trying to get at. It was grant reporting for a nonprofit. They just weren't aware that those fields existed inside of QuickBooks because you have to enable them, right? So we're going to be talking about a little bit today. As always, if you miss any of these videos or you want to go back and catch them again, we have our YouTube channel, and then we also have a Facebook group where people can go and talk about all things enterprise, right? Enterprise users only in there mostly, I think, or consultants. Also, as a reminder, I know everybody who is in QuickBooks Enterprise does have a support plan because you are on subscription. And if you ever want to not have to call Intuit support again, then we have this on-demand support. So we want to remind you guys about that. Support is probably one of the biggest things that we're trying to combat right now. When you have your IT person, right, you don't call Microsoft support directly, you call your IT person. So that's who we are for QuickBooks. Okay, let's talk about list usage. So there are a lot of lists in QuickBooks. I'm just going to hold this up here for a second. The purpose of lists, right, when it comes to a database is so that you can report on those lists, or you can give some data. It's data extraction somewhere, right? So why do we put an item on an invoice? Because we're trying to tell the customer what they're purchasing. If we just put it straight to, inventory, the customer wouldn't necessarily know what they're purchasing. So that's why we use an item. We're communicating something through this list. But that's also allowing us to do things like see how much of a particular item we're selling, or roll it up and see how much materials versus labor we're selling, because they roll up to a GL account code on your P&L. Okay, so all of these things we can use to get to more reporting. So we're going to talk about all of these lists, hopefully all these lists today. So first things first, where are these lists sitting? So when we're inside of QuickBooks, and I'm going to spend most of the time inside of here, as always, our lists are sitting under this drop-down called lists, right? Most lists are here. There is one list or a couple lists that don't reside here, like your customer list. You don't see that here. You have to go to the customer center. Or our memorized reports. We have a list of those as are over here. But most of our kind of sub-ledger lists reside here. Excuse me. So you can see all these different options. Now, we're not talking about all of them today. We're just talking about some major ones, right? They have payroll item lists. I'm not going to go into payroll. Other names lists, we choose not to use. We try to get people not to use them. But some of these lists that you see in here are super duper powerful. Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about today. There's a couple different levels of when we think about a list. I'm going to break this down for you. The first thing that we want to think about is, where does that list show up transactionally? So I'm going to start with chart of accounts, okay? Because that's everywhere. Let's start with chart of accounts. So we have our chart of accounts list. right? That is a list in the system. When we go into a transaction, like an invoice, okay, I do not have the ability on this transaction to edit the chart of accounts. The only time I might have the ability to edit the chart of account, because you have to put an item, right? And so the chart of accounts is set up at the item level, not at the transaction level. The only time I might be able to choose a chart of accounts account is if I have multiple accounts receivable. So if I set up another accounts receivable account, which again, we don't suggest doing. There's very few times where we suggest having multiple AR accounts. But let's just say this is, I don't know, second AR. I can't even come up with a word because I just don't want to use it. So I create a second AR account. Now on the invoice, I can choose which AR account this is pointing to. Okay. Which one? The same thing when we, write a check. On the check up top, I choose which bank account is it coming from. And then down below, I have the choice. I can point it to a GL account code, or I can have it flow through an item to a GL account code. So the first thing that we want to think about is when we're talking about a list and trying to get to a report from that list item, maybe, is where can we edit it? Where on the transaction is it available? So I'm going to stick with invoices for now. Chart of accounts is really a hard one, but so you see here, again, if I didn't have multiple accounts receivable accounts, I would not be able to edit the chart of accounts account that this invoice goes to. So if I look at an invoice and I go into my transaction journal over here, and I see all the accounts that it's hitting on this transaction, I can't force it to hit different accounts. I have to instead go in and either edit the item, edit where sales tax is pointing, and then or add an additional accounts receivable account. Okay. So that's one thing. Where does it sit on the transaction? Most of the time when we're looking at data from transactions. That's not to say you can't run a report like show me all customers in the state of Tennessee. But that's not a transaction report, right? That's a filter just based off of a customer list. So where does it show up on the transaction? And can we edit that list item on the transaction? So another one on here is class. Okay. So I have class at the header level, up top, and I have class at the line level. So I can edit it up here and down there. Again, when I save this and I look at my transaction journal, class is right here, right? And so brand 1, because I have brand 1 up top, shows up. And so this amount would be pointing to brand 1. These line amounts would all be pointing to custom pool systems. And then notice how I don't have the ability to edit where sales tax payable goes to, right, down here, but it chooses to pick up where the header goes. Okay. So it's important to know, what can you edit, header and line? Customer job. So I assign the customer job up top here at the header. And when I look at that transaction journal, right, it assigns the customer name to every line. Now, on this transaction journal, it's saying what is the name, and the sales tax gets paid to the comptroller, right? So if I actually customize this and I put source name, then it'll pull the customer list. It's just a different field, but it'll pull the customer onto every line. So for some reason, I needed to associate customer job and also show the total of sales tax I would use that source name field. Okay. Customer type. So I'm gonna go into customer type here, and then I'm gonna pause for a second. All right, well, I'm gonna do two more, customer type and sales rep. So customer type. If I go into my formatting and my customized data layout, this shows me all the fields that I can add onto an invoice. And if I look down all these fields, none of them show customer type. Okay, all these fields I can add, none of them are customer type. If I go into my layout designer and I say I want to add a data field, none of these fields are customer type. Okay. So where do we edit customer type? Where is that set up? That is actually set up at the customer itself. Okay, so we come in here, we go to additional information, and look at that. We have the customer type here. So I say home builder. Now, if I go back into my invoice and I say customize, I go into my reports and do transaction journal, right? I don't have that to add to this report here. But where I can access that data is in some of my custom transaction detailed reports or in some of my just general P&L reports. What I like to look at is I come in here and I say, okay, I'm going to run a standard profit and loss report. Because why would we be looking at customer type? What would we be using that for? Generally, we want to say, okay, how much did we sell to this customer type versus that customer type? That would be the most common usage. Other things we use it for is like security, right? So only allow them to see this customer type versus that customer type. But that's what we would generally use it for, right? Some kind of reporting. So when I come into this report, I always look for what can I add to a total by report. So a P&L is the most basic one because it's already preset. So I can do total by week, month, blah, blah, blah. I can total by customer, vendor, employee, payroll item detail, payee, which is random, sales rep, which we're going to talk about in a second, class, item type, meaning is it an inventory part or a service item, non-inventory part, item detail, so a P&L by each individual item, shipping method, that's random, like the ship via. We can total a P&L by terms. I don't know who would ever want to see a P&L total by terms, but you can do that in here, so it's important to know. Payment method, and then sales tax code. So this report, what we can total by, tells me the possibility of how I can utilize these fields if I need to. Now, of course, customer type is what we were talking about. It doesn't show up here. So to get to customer type, there's another report besides P&L. We go into custom transaction summary report. And when we go into custom transaction summary report, we can display rows by income statement, which is basically saying the same thing. I am building a P&L. And I want to display columns by, so how am I going to total by? We see a lot of the same things. Total by balance sheet, I mean, it's random. Total by account, so I don't know why you do that, like P&L down the side and then account across the top, I don't know. But I do have customer and customer type. So I can run a P&L by customer type using this custom transaction summary report. I cannot edit customer type on transactions, but I can report against that field, right? As long as we have it set up at the customer level, I can report against that field. So some of the other ones you see in your vendor type, we didn't see that on the other list. Employee. We saw sales rep, item type, item detail. Inventory site, we didn't see that on the other list. Okay, so those are a couple that are added in here. So when we think about how am I going to get to that report that I need, that data that I need? Now, best case scenario is the system tells us the data, right? So if I go in to my customer list, and when I create a customer, I also set up a customer type for all time in the future. Anytime I do a transaction to this customer, I don't have to worry about customer type because it's preset one-time entry, and now I can report against it for all time. Okay, so those are my favorite. Now, the one thing about QuickBooks is that it does not force you to fill in customer types. So you do have to have some processes set up, some workflows set up maybe once a month or once a week or however often, where you are reviewing a report that you've created that shows you all customers where customer type is blank. So you can do that right here, actually, if you wanted to. Also, I can come in, customize my columns, add in customer type. I can make this a flat view instead of a hierarchical view, and then just sort by customer type, right? And so it'll show me at the top any that don't have customer types filled in, and I can go fix those. You can do the same thing and paste from Excel, by the way. Excuse me, right? So I can show all active customers. I have customer type. I sort by that column, and then I can mass fill in if I wanted to, or kind of grid edit fill in. So it's a very powerful field because we can run a P&L by. Okay. So I'm going to go back into my item and just show one more, into my invoice and show one more. So sales rep, right? Sales rep, we can have two different levels. I can set it up at the transaction level, and it's setting it up at the header. So if I save this transaction, and then I come into my reports and my transaction journal, and I customize this and I put in rep, right? It adds the sales rep to every line. The accounts receivable line, the sales tax line, it adds it to every line. So that tells us putting it at the header, right, similar to customer, putting it at the header adds it to all the lines. It's good to know. I can also go into my customer center and set up a default, right? So I can come in here and say, who is my sales rep? And then every time I create a transaction, I'll default to that. But on the transaction itself, it allows me to edit it if I leave that field there, right? So it allows me to edit it. So it's a little bit different than customer type. Customer type, I can't edit on the fly. Sales rep, I can edit on the fly. So good to know. Okay. Now I'm just looking at invoices here, and we want to think about this a little bit. So all of those different fields, we want to be able to say, okay, and I'm just going to focus on invoices. I'm not going to focus on payables right now. But okay, now we know customer here, class is here, chart of accounts is somewhere in there. We have sales rep. We have terms, we can add in these other fields. We have class at the line level. We have items, right? Items are at the line level, not at the header level. All of these different fields. So what we want to do is we want to look at the results. So what happens? So I'm going to just do it as a custom transaction summary report because it has the most. And I'm just going to say, all time and do total by total only. Because once I get total by total only, then I can come in here and start looking at these. So I'm going to total by account list, right? And it says I can't do that because I've got account list down the side, and then I would have account list down the top, and that would make no sense. Okay, I'm going to cut total by customer. So we have customer total in here. Now, if I look at the total by total only, right, I have 339,000. That's what it's showing me on this report. By total by customer, and I come down to the side and the bottom, I have $445,000 in net income. And that's because there are some transactions that are not tied to customers, right? So these two are not going to balance out because there's probably some, gas charges or expense charges that are not associated with the customer. But what's nice to know is that it does pick up some of them. So some of these, like auto insurance, if I double click in here, and this is a journal entry, but it shows, why is this one associated? I picked a random one in here and it's not showing a name. 390. Oh, because this one's saying no name. Sorry, no name. No name, but it's possible that it could have a name. Let me pick one that does have a name in here. So here's some. Do you have any costs on my demo list? Of course, I picked the no name one, right? Okay, here we go. So here's some gas charges on a bill where I have associated the charges with a customer. So I can associate it with it, right, at the line level. And so that's why it's showing up here. So some expenses, if I have other bills that are not associated with a customer, let's find one. Well, we saw one just a minute ago, but that are not associated with the customer, it's going to show that it's not going to show up on this report. Okay. All right. And if we look in the no name ones here, these are all ones that don't have a name associated with it, but could have, right? Could have had a name associated with it. Like here's a sales receipt. I didn't put a customer job on the sales receipt because it's not required. Okay. But there's going to be a difference. Now let's total by customer type. The total by customer type, it looks different than even totaling by customer. So we're at the 377, 208, 45. Now notice in here that it doesn't pick up the no names. It doesn't pick up the ones that are missing, right? So you're only going to see on here ones that have a customer type. Important to note. If I come in and I do it by rep, right? On this one, 39, just barely off, but we have, who are my reps? And then I have what are the ones with no sales reps associated with it. So it's important to see what is on these reports. Okay. There's that 3,900 because we can't associate a sales rep on we can't put a sales rep on a journal entry. So it's a transaction type. If we needed to have everything associated with the sales rep somehow, we can't put it on that kind of transaction because the field doesn't exist. So hopefully you guys are getting some of the idea behind this. So I want to talk a little bit about custom fields now, because we do have the ability to add in custom fields. You can come in and add in between 11 and 15 custom fields, depending on the list item. And all of these custom fields, you can add custom fields to the transaction level, at the header, or at the line level, depending on where you put the custom fields. The thing about QuickBooks to know with it, though, is that when we're reporting, if you guys remember in there, right, there was no total by stage, which you saw was one of my custom fields that I had on there. Okay, no total by stage. There's only filter by custom field stage. And when we filter by custom field stage, we have to know exactly what we're looking for. It's not a drop-down list. Doesn't mean we can't have it show up on reports, but we can't total by inside of QuickBooks. We can do it in Q-bar. So it's really important to know that one. Okay. All right. I know that I'm jumping around a lot here. So what does this look like? So here is what we want to be able to take away from this, is we want to be able to take away when we are sitting and we're thinking about, I need to get to a report. I need to get this data, whatever the data is. We need to know, where is that data coming from? Is it coming from transactions? Is it coming from a list? And then if it's coming from transactions, is it coming from the header of the transaction? Or is it coming from the lines? Or does it cover all lines of the transaction? Which transactions can we not see this field on? And journal entry is like the most basic, right, of things we can create. So I don't have sales rep on here. I don't have ship via. I don't have terms on here. I do have name. I can put customer. I do have class. I do have account. I don't have item on here. So if in my report, I need data from journal entries that we're putting in the system, then I'm limited in what I can report on. Or what you can do, right, because a journal entry is literally just a debit and credit, you can find out a different way to do it. So I can come in and create a $0 check. All right, so I can have the items in, this item, this item, this item, and then I can have a expense account for an offset, something, -0.9, allows me to put a customer job, allows me to put a class, allows me to put an item. So figuring out different ways inside of QuickBooks to post the data using a transaction so that you can use those extra fields is very important, right? That's how we get to some of these reports. That's how we have to be creative with how is the data going to go in so that we can get to these end reports. So some times when we see people use $0 checks or $0 bills or things like that. So we've seen people use this for things like posting payroll, and you need to you have payroll coming from an outside system. You want to post it against the service items so that it shows up on job costing tied through a service item, which you couldn't do if it tied through a check, right? Through a journal entry. You can't post it through the service item. So we'll set it up as a $0 check in here. We won't run it through the normal checking account. We might create a secondary checking account called payroll clearing with everything is 0. That'll allow us to post it through the service item so that when we run our estimate versus actuals, we can use those service items and have estimate versus actual. That's one reason we've seen people do $0 checks. Another reason we've seen people do $0 checks is allocating costs across multiple classes. So again, multiple customers or classes. I've seen people do this in like the nonprofit space. So I was talking about this earlier. Nonprofit space, a lot of times people don't put every donor into their QuickBooks file. Or if they're doing grants, as an example, who really is the customer in a grant situation? The grant, right? Maybe. So we can use that customer job field. We can use the item field. We can use the class field. We can use vendor, because we're putting a vendor on here. We can use vendor type even. Putting a vendor type on here. So putting it onto a transaction allows us to get more out of the reporting from this list. And then if we even go further and we put on custom fields, right, that we set up at the vendor level, then it'll allow us to run reports by those custom fields as well. Okay, I know we're up against time, so hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I would love to see if you guys have any questions, any follow-ups. Love to see how you guys are using some of these lists, and if you're not, right, and we're reporting on data using Excel, maybe we could help you get creative with using some of these lists so that the system can create the reports for you and you're not having to do it outside the system. Because again, even though it says ship via, even though it says sales rep, maybe you don't use those fields. Just like we were talking about, customer job. Maybe you don't use that field because you don't really have customers and jobs that you track. But we should be using that field because it can help us get to data in our system. So if we're not, let us help you be creative. Coming up, so we still have our work in process coming up, user permissions deep dive in Enterprise. It's a big one. I want you guys to pay attention on that one because it's a big deal, some of the stuff that they've put in place. That's all I got for you guys this week. If I didn't get to your questions, or if I can't get to your questions right away, then I will email you afterwards, okay? Thanks, guys.